So a recurring theme through these videos has been stories that we heard as a kid. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes little things you get from family members, grandparents. They always stick with you, and you pass down information to us through stories and a little bit of your personality and everything in there. And once we were sitting there, and you told me a story, and I just lost my mind at the end. Potter
You mean the Potter?
of the. Do you want me to cut that out?
No. Harry Potter came much later than the Potter.
Well, we both read those books together. That's where my
Oh
confusion
yeah.
was.
But the story is purely mine because I looked at the way I learned to make pottery, and then I looked in the woods and I saw how it was made in the woods by the animals, and it actually holds water and it don't break. And I said, well, I'll be damned. And that's when all of a sudden the story hit me like I'd done read the book 50 times. All of a sudden the whole story was in my head. And I said, I'll be John Brown. That's a good one.
Don't you love it when that happens?
Huh?
I said, don't you love it when that happens?
I do. I love it when that happens. And all of a sudden, I mean, no matter what part of the story I tried to think of, the whole thing was there. And I said, oh my God, I got to get home, write this down. That was a good one.
Nice.
But the end didn't come until after I talked to y'all, and I was sitting there, and I was telling y'all the story, and that's when the end came up.
I feel like it just came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, it just flew out of nowhere, the end of it about Harry Potter, yeah.
I still remember your facial features when you clicked the idea in your head right before you said it. Because
Yeah.
you were laughing on the way out with it.
I thought that was good. That was a good story.
You should tell it.
Like when?
Right now.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're live.
Howdy out there in radio land. This here is me.
This is my grandfather.
Or is this computer land?
It's the digital realm, the last frontier.
The last frontier.
Space.
That's
the
what
final
they
frontier.
said about Texas, the last frontier.
Right. Texas is fixing to be its own state or its own country.
Yeah, it was at one time.
Yep.
When it got free from Mexico, I said, you stupid bunch of, you should have stayed between America and Mexico as a free state.
Yep.
And collected all the fees for all the, man, they had to raise cattle. We'd have bought cattle out of Texas.
Oh, yeah.
We'd have bought stuff from Mexico and had to pay a fee to drive through Texas with it. Texas thought they'd be smart, but they wouldn't quite.
Well, they did reserve the right to secede from the Union.
They did, yes.
So, not too late.
And you know what kind of stink that'll make.
I know that we'd probably take it over and just get it right back.
But see, why did they fought for the South in the Civil War, but they still had to be annexed back to the United States. Now, if they had the right to succeed anytime they wanted to, Texas should not have been, a part of the Civil War.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So, you got all kind of ways you can twist things and bend them.
Well, speaking of that, twist and bend this story for us.
Okay. About this young Indian fella. He was about 15, time for him to go out on his vision quest. And he was trying to figure out, which way to go and everything. But what had happened to him as a youngster, one of the horses got loose in the living area and was acting up and bucking and going crazy because he got stung on the butt by a hornet. And it stomped his foot. So his foot was kind of crippled, and bent to the left, and he couldn't walk on it very well. And he couldn't keep up with the other boys when they'd take off running, so he spent an awful lot of time by himself.
Poor guy.
And poor guy at first, it's kind of bad. Gee, the guys don't like me. They won't wait on me. So what he started doing was hanging out with animals, wild animals, and learning about them. He learned where the deer went to eat in the early morning and drink in the afternoons, and he learned where all the birds like to nest at night and how they built their nest and everything. He learned everything there was to know about animals. He knew more than some of the great hunters did. Because whenever it come time for him his mama was a little hungry and his daddy wasn't feeling too good, he'd take the bow and arrow at 13 years old and come back out with an 8-point buck.
Mm-hmm.
And, the hunters couldn't understand that. And they said, geez, he's smart, he's good. But the wouldn't have nothing to do with him because he couldn't keep up, and they made fun of his foot.
Oh,
Well,
cripple.
time to go out into the woods and seek my fortune, seek my vision. So he packed up his stuff, and he got ready, and he told his mother he was going. His daddy patted him on the shoulder and told him, son, be sure to come back and talk to the shaman, and he'll tell you what your vision means. And he took off and went out into the great beyond. And when he got out there, he knew everything out there because he'd been walking it so much. But then he got into parts that he didn't know, and that's what he knew he had to do, get someplace he wasn't sure of.
Yeah.
So he could, talk to the spirits about it and everything. So he was going along there, and all of a sudden he'd come to this burned-off area. So he figured he'd turn and go to the left. Well, he went to the left not very far, and it was burned off.
What was it?
It was a forest fire. Lightning had come through in a big storm and burned
man.
everything off a couple of weeks before. And he was on a green patch that run out there because it had a creek on it.
Okay.
And now he had done left the creek and got up there on the top of the hill, and now everything around him is burnt. He said, I don't want to go back the way I just came, so I'll walk across this burned area. So he started walking across the burned area. And as he walked across the burned area, it was dry, and it got hot, and he got thirsty, and he drank all his water.
Uh-oh.
He said, what am I going to do? Well, the next day, he was really thirsty. As he was coming up out of this little gully-like thing, he saw this bowl sitting in a tree.
Huh.
He said, what in the world is that stone bowl doing in the tree? And he walked over to it, and it wasn't stone like his mother and father made out of soapstone. It wasn't bowls like that because they were too heavy. This bowl was sitting up in there nice and light, and he looked at it. And as he looked at it, he began to see little places where sticks had been sticking out of it, and the way it was set in the bushes and around some of the limbs that had burned off and everything. He said, this is a robin's nest. Robins build their nest with mud.
Oh, yeah.
Or doves. He wasn't sure which. He said, I'm pretty sure it's a robin's nest because they line their nest with mud and then pack it with soft stuff. Well, what made him even more excited was the fact that it was full of water.
Oh, yeah, like a cup.
Yeah, so he sipped it and he said, hey, this is good water. It's rainwater. It must have rained here yesterday. So he drank the water. Well, he took the bowl with him, thinking about it the whole time. How in the world did the bird make this? And as he was walking along, he came to a creek bank that still had water in it and green things. He was able to catch some crawfish and stuff. And he found some clay. He said, hey, here's some of this clay. So he made him a pot and let it dry. Well, as soon as he tried to put water in, it fell apart. He said, what the heck? Oh, it was the fire.
How long did it take him to figure that out?
Fire's what made it hard. So he made him another bowl out of clay, built him a fire, and put it in it. Well, it cracked all the pieces.
Uh-oh.
He couldn't figure it out. He sat there, and this guy was pretty smart, okay? He said, okay, the bird builds the nest. After the bird builds the nest, whether it was last year or this year, I don't know, but a fire come along, and it was dry. So he makes another pot, just a simple little high-sided ashtray, so to speak.
Yeah.
And he takes that and he let it dry for about 4 or 5 days until he was sure it was dry. And then he set it out in the sun for another day and let it really get dry because he didn't want it to dry too fast.
Yeah.
Then he built a fire and he set it around the fire and kept turning it and letting it get hot real slow, and then he shoved it in the fire and built the fire up over and let it go. Tomorrow morning he cleaned the ashes away. Hot dog. It was a bowl.
He did it.
He did it.
Yes.
And he got to fooling around and says, well, some of that clay had sand in it, and this has got a little sand in it. Maybe I need to keep putting stuff in it to keep it hard like that so it won't fall apart. Because he noticed that the bird had sticks.
Yeah, good idea.
Burned into his, and that's what held it together. It was what they call I knew the name for it yesterday. But anyway, it's like rocks and concrete.
Like thatch or something?
You can make concrete.
Yeah.
And lay it out, but you hit it with something that'll break.
Like mortar.
But no, any kind of concrete. You lay it out there without anything in it, and it'll break.
Oh, like
but
rebar.
You put rebar or gravel in it.
Yeah.
And that holds it together. And I can't remember the name of that word. I'm too old to remember words like that.
It's okay.
But anyway, he was tickled to death. So he made pots with necks on them. He made pots with handles on them. He just got, gone away with it. It's like learned a new trick. And he was smoothing the outside of them, with leaves. He'd smooth them off real smooth, and then he'd draw pictures on them.
Yeah.
And so he kept that up. And finally, he said, "What am I going to do with all these damn pots?" So he took the pots and he picked the best ones, the ones that were the best with the necks on them and the handles, and he even learned how to make straw tops for them by weaving the top to put on them.
Nice.
And he said, "This, I need people to help me with this. This idea is just too good." So he shot a deer that afternoon, had himself a great feast that day and the next morning, and he took the hide, and it had been drying out, and he couldn't wait for it to get cured. He placed the pots in straw and everything in it, and bundled it all up, looked at the sun to see where the sun was so he knew which way the village was, and he went back.
Nice. He's ready.
Yeah, well, he found it. And he walked in with his thing on his back, and they were all so proud to see him. They didn't think he'd live out there with that foot the way it was. He wouldn't be able to hunt. They didn't know how good a hunter he was.
So they're happy to see him.
Oh, gosh, yeah. They was
good.
all over the place, and they wanted to know what was in the bundle. That's what they were wanting to know, because it was something new. He wouldn't bring it in a big bundle like that. What's he got? What's he got? And so everybody come out to see. And he set it down in the middle of the village and opened it up. And they said, "Oh, bowls." He said, "No. Look at this one." And he held one up that he had cut a piece of wood and used as a stopper. He said, "Here, have a drink." And they said, "This is clay." And he said, "Yep."
Yeah.
They pulled a stopper out of it and took a drink of water and said, "That's good, clear spring water." He said, "Yep." And they said, "Well, where did you get it?" He said, "I made it." He said, "You made it?" And he showed them the robin's nest, how it had been in the tree and the fire had burned all around it. And he said, "So I figured that if I made one out of clay and let it dry real good and then put it in a fire for overnight, and this is what I got." And so I started making different kinds, see how they work. The ladies went nuts. "We can make these and leave them here and make new ones at our next camp.
Yep.
That way we won't have to lug these big old heavy soapstone bowls with us." So the ladies he started showing them how to make it. Some of the men could make it, some couldn't, and they started rolling out the clay in long rolls and rolling it around and smoothing it out. And so he was a big hero. And so they give him a new Indian name. Instead of Twisted Foot, they now called him the Potter.
The Potter.
The Potter. So he was the Potter, the pot maker. And so he showed everybody that wanted to learn how to make pots. So they had long neck pots, they had open face pots, they had plates, everybody was just tickled. This is the greatest summer they ever had. And when they moved to their new camp, they was able to make new pots. And they didn't have to carry them with us. That's one big load they didn't have to carry.
Yeah.
And they was tickled. They could store stuff in it and leave it there till they got back next year, and the seed would still be in there hidden from the rats and the mice.
That's good.
And they were just tickled to death. So they would bury them, and then they'd come back next spring and dig them up. So they were tickled to death, and he became a very popular member of the tribe, and they all wanted to know. They found out how much he knew about animals, so they started learning about animals from him. But the Potter was his biggest claim to fame, and he was always showing them new ways to make new different kind of pots and stuff. Pots that could take the heat, pots that couldn't.
Amazing.
And stuff like that. And he was so famous, his name began to carry on through the tribe. And if you'll think about it real hard, you've heard of his great-great-great-great-grandfather, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. I can't believe.
Was that okay?
Yeah, was I like what, 8, 9, something when I first heard that story?
I think it was about 8.
Yeah, oh my God, I had just read The Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah.
And these people on the internet are never going to know what it felt like to be there.
No.
But I'm sitting there, having just introduced you to it. You kind of liked it. You just started reading it, and then you'd said that joke out of nowhere. And I kid you not, I probably had to change my shorts because it was, in real life, it was hilarious.
Well, sometimes something hits you just right, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But the story, I couldn't believe, because, the reason, and the other thing is, after I had that story out, I was out there clearing out some of that property on the side of the house there, and I found clay pot in a bush where one of those birds had built his nest in the bush and left it.
Oh.
I put it in the fire. It burned the sticks out from around it, and I made a pot out of it.
That's cool. You know,
and somebody took it.
Uh-oh, who took it?
I have no idea, but it was always sitting in there in a special place. Even Susie thought it was nice.
Hey.
And I come in one day and it wasn't there, and I didn't say nothing. I waited for a week, and I asked her where it went. She said, well, it's right there. And she looked, she said, well, where'd you put it? I said, I ain't touched it. And, of course, nobody knows where it went.
Tell them about the haunted pottery.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Susie's, my deceased wife, had a brother that lived right on almost on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, but it was up on a bluff-like thing. And he had a garden behind his house, and he was always finding arrowheads back there. So I asked him if I could go back there and hunt arrowheads, and he said, sure. So I went back there and dug it up for him, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because, it wasn't planting time yet, so I was digging it up. And I was turning it over, and I was digging it up and turning it over and finding arrowheads. And finally, I built me a little fire in the middle of the garden, got it going and waited till it died down. He had 2 ears of corn left out there from last year's corn. I laid it in the edge of the fire along with some, bugler pipe tobacco.
Yeah.
Poured it on and let it smoke up, and then I put some sage on it. And then I let it smoke there for a while and hope spirits enjoyed it, and I told them so. And then I said, well, y'all need to show me something. I'm not here to be greedy. I'm not here to make money. I'm here to learn something. And I'd like to learn something. So show me where I can find something that would teach me something. So I closed my eyes and started walking around that garden, and I walked into a tree. Boom. But when I opened my eyes, I was 10 foot from the edge of the garden, and there wasn't nothing in front of me or around me. So I marked the spot, went and got my shovel and my shaker, my screen, and I come back and I started digging. I dug right into a pit. That thing was full of arrowheads, drill bits.
Wow.
It was full of all kinds of pieces of pottery that were broken. As I went down through it, I found nutting stones. Now, the nutting stones are stones that's got holes drilled in them with another harder stone. You use a piece of slate stone and you just bore your round hole in it, so it's like if you stuck your knuckle down in it, it'd be smooth.
Yeah.
And what you do is you put a nut in there, and when you hit it with another stone, all it will do is crack the shell open. It won't smash it.
It's pretty smart.
And then you just, shake the shell off of it. Now you got the inside of the nut. Acorns work good that way. And hickory nuts, you can break hickory nuts like that, and they won't smash. They'll just pop open. And I couldn't believe it. I found 2 of them. I still got one of them here at the house. I use the other one for trading material. But I found a pot, and it was big, huge pieces of it, but the clay and the years of him gardening up there and everything, the clay had moved and the pot had separated. So I found all the pieces. There were about 5 pieces, and I was putting it back together. And I was putting it back together, and I had it in the house, and I had it sitting on a little bed of sand in a cardboard box with 3-inch sides. And I was putting it back together, and I got it all back together. And I was just sitting there looking at it, admiring it. I didn't know whether it was a cook pot because it had a round bottom. Didn't have legs on it, just had a round bottom, and it was smoke burnt. And I was looking at it saying, could have been a crock pot.
Yeah.
And when you look on the inside, you can see where the person's fingers had went around.
Wow.
It smoothed it out. But I went downstairs that night. I smelled something, and I said, what in the heck is Susie doing up this time of night cooking? Or maybe she's got something else. I went down there expecting to find a pot of beans on the stove because that's what it smelled like.
Yeah.
And as I went down there wasn't nothing on the stove, wasn't nothing. I kept smelling them, and I started walking towards the dining room table, and as I got over there, I put my head over the top of that pot, and I smelled it, and it had the prettiest turtle designs on the side of it, just completely covered in a little turtle shell design with stripes. And man, it was this beautiful pot.
Yeah.
And I was smelling it, and it smelled like beans.
Oh my!
Soaking
spooky.
in water. Huh?
I said spooky.
Yeah. And I walked away, and I come back, and as closer I got to the table, the more it smelled like you had put lima beans or butter beans in a boiler and set them on the stove in water to soak all night so you could cook them tomorrow. and I was smelling them beans, and I said, man, that is out of sight. Now, this was about 12 o'clock at night, so I said, okay. I went back upstairs and went back to bed. Tomorrow's Saturday. I got up, went downstairs, and put the coffee on. Susie come downstairs. She was walking around, wrinkling her nose. I said, what's the matter? She said, what you cooking? I said, I'm making coffee. She said, you was cooking something. I said, no, I wasn't. I said, go over there around that pot and smell that. She went over there. She started smelling. She put her face over that pot. And she said, it smells like beans. I said, that was a cooking pot. And the spirits are so happy that I got their pot back together. They're imaginary cooking beans and everything. She says, I want that pot out of this house. I don't care where it goes. I don't want it in this house.
And you'd have had to seen her say that, too, to know how funny that is.
With that finger pointing out there shaking.
Now, Ray?
With his short hair.
Yeah.
And then my eyebrows stuck way up in there.
Oh, my God. She would have been
but
so...
I'll tell you, one night, I had me a softwood tree, like cedar.
Yeah.
And I've got it in the bedroom back there. Except the one I had then, it had a tiki face carved on the top of it with a beard and the hands underneath the beard. And then I had different animals and snakes and stuff carved all down it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was my walking stick, and it was made out of cedar, and it was pretty steady, and it didn't split, and it didn't rot, and it wasn't too heavy.
Yeah.
Well, I had it leaning up against the cabinet one night, and she come in there. She was mad about something, and she started fussing and everything like that. That stick stood up. I mean, it was leaning over so far, it wasn't no accidentally stood up because she was standing on the floor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This thing was leaning at about a 50-degree angle.
Jeez.
And it was up in the corner, leaning up in the corner of the cabinet. So it wasn't in the way or nothing. It just stood up, and the face was looking right at her.
Oh, wow.
It stood up and stood there and looked at her, and then fell down across in front of her. She almost cried. She said, you get that outside. Get that outside the house right now.
She always thought it was your stuff and not just the house.
She didn't know some of the stuff that I prayed about when I was making those things, you know.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm making something, I say prayers over it. So anybody I give it to, the prayers go with it for that person. And I don't have any idea who I'm giving it to. I just say special prayers while I'm making it and say, let these prayers go with this to whoever I give it to. Huh. And it's actually helped some people, believe it or not. So prayers change things.
I don't know if it's intuitive or if I learned it from you, but I go buy crystals, and, you know, I touch them all in the store, and I pick the one that I want, that I really want.
The one it sings to you.
Yeah, and so I hold it every day for, like, anywhere from a month to a year until I find a person who's doing something nice for someone else, and then I give it to them. And so the whole time I hold it, even when I try to sleep, and I put good intentions in it, and then I give it to them.
Yeah, and the prayers that you say, you know, it's a computer chip. Is all it is.
Right.
A quartz crystal is a computer chip, and it can and your body has an electronic field around it.
Yep.
A magnetic field. So you know. They used to call it auras in the days of the hippies. Man, he's got a beautiful aura.
They still say
Turn
it.
off all the lights and get high and look at his aura. But sometimes somebody walk in a room and you don't like them, and you don't know why. They ain't said nothing. You've never met them. You just don't like them. It's because his magnetic field and yours is out of sync, out of pulse. They don't mesh at all. And that's why sometimes you think it's love at first sight. You see a girl and yours and hers is just harmonizing so much that you just can't believe it.
Yep.
It's love at first sight.
Especially when you've been conditioned and confused about what love really is. And then you feel that and you're like, oh, this is it. This is it.
Yeah. So anything I make or anything that I do, I try my best to put prayers on it.
Yeah.
And send it. And send it off with somebody because, like I said, it has actually helped a couple people out, and they didn't know it.
I believe that. I really do.
And you were always like a sponge. You soaked up everything that I ever tried to talk about or teach everything. You sat there and listened where the rest of them make fun of it.
Well, sometimes people make fun of things that they're uncomfortable believing.
Well, I'll tell you something else, too. You know that house in Georgia?
Yeah?
That two-story house there?
Yeah?
We were riding around looking at houses, and I didn't like any of them we was looking at. For some reason, didn't impress me.
Yeah.
We got lost out there in Shady Shores. We got lost out there and was on that road, and I said, look, there's a house for sale. Let's look at it. And it was off down by itself in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
We walked up on the porch, and the door was locked, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and she says, I want to see the real estate agent.
Yeah.
I said, why? She says, this feels like home. I said, don't it?
Wow.
Destin, when I walked up on that porch, it was like that house reached out and put a big old arm around me and said, I've been waiting a year for you, and it had been on the market for a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and when we bought it, we couldn't believe the price we got for it. And
must be because it was haunted.
Got those 2 extra lots on the side, you know, so shoot, man, we was in high cotton.
It's because it was haunted. Nobody just wanted to say anything.
Well, yeah, and that house in the lots on the lots next to me there, those 2 lots that I bought where that other house was.
Yeah.
That lady committed suicide.
Right.
Her child died for no reason.
Yeah, we talked about it last time actually on this.
Yeah, and she committed suicide, and then there was nobody living in the house, and it just burned down.
That's crazy.
And that's before people started hanging out there and living and squatting and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
It was just an old 1920s wood frame house, and she burnt down.
Wow.
It was a 2-story house also.
Huh. I wonder if there's any pictures of it anywhere.
Well, we got ghosts living in this house, I'll tell you that.
Do you?
Brian talks to them all the time. He says they come in here bother trying to, you know, they come in here and he said, I can feel them.
Yeah.
He says, when they walk behind me, he says, I can feel the breeze. He says, and it's like somebody sitting in the chair and I'm afraid to look. He says, I'll ask him if you want to play this game with me, you can watch it, but you can't play it. And he says, and then pretty soon they're gone. And we can be sitting here in the living room with the lights out watching TV, and you'll see somebody come out of the laundry room into the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's so.
Nothing,
you'll have fun when you come down here.
Nothing I'm not used to. I grew up in a house that was on top of an Indian burial ground.
Oh, I remember that one, that trailer.
Yeah. I went by there not long ago.
Still there?
Yeah, it looks different, but it's still there. But
hey,
hey,
them people next door are assholes.
I have to end it there. Now I can't have that word on here.
Okay, you can cut that out.
Hey, listen. Thank you for calling in again. I really appreciate it.
Destin, son, I love you more than anything, and I'm glad that your family's doing well. And like I said, anytime you can get down here, you get down here.
I'll do my best to see you.
And Granny said if you want to come down and look for a house, that you're welcome to stay here while you look for a house.
Okay.
Just don't bring no coronavirus